But yeah, that fucking article I read earlier.
Of Sony
Oh my
being an
God.
absolute
Dude,
mentally disabled seal.
I'm so heated.
They're mentally ill.
Sony doesn't know what they're doing, like, at all. It all started when they... Okay, first of all, let's just get this out of the way. A Venom movie without Spider-Man...
Doesn't make sense.
That's already incredibly sketchy.
Like, it's happened. Venom is one of like the most mainstay villains of Spider-Man, and it has worked for comics.
It's worked for but the only reason it's worked for comics is because something has happened prior to it. The whole reason that Venom exists is because Spidey had the symbiote first. There's literally no Venom without Spidey. There's no universe where they make Venom without Spidey and it makes sense. That just doesn't happen. So that's already the first sketchy thing, is the fact that they're making a Venom movie that's not going to have Spider-Man in it.
But it's in the same universe, even though it's not.
Oh yeah, no, it's in the same universe as Spider-Man Homecoming, but it's not MCU, guys. It's not MCU, but it's in the same universe
totally
as the MCU.
Different.
Yeah. Okay, Sony. Yeah. You sell your tickets yet?
It's like, even then, it's like I already understand. There's some sketchy little plot holes in Homecoming as it is, with, like, you know, the whole 8-year gap and, like, kind of being off that way. So it's like Spider-Man Homecoming is already a little bit of a shit show. Still loved it. Still one of my, I will say, the best Spider-Man movie ever. But in terms of continuity, there's a lot of continuity
plot holes, but that's fine. Because Homecoming has an established universe.
But that's what I'm saying. If you were to watch it, like, the element of Homecoming where it starts with them, like, in the destruction of the first Avengers battle, and then it's like 8 years later, and then it's supposed to be set a few months after Civil War, which is actually in 2016. It's like there's a few little continuity errors there, and that's the thing I'm trying to say. It's like, and it's not to say it's a bad movie, it's just they're there already. So them saying, like, yeah, it's like it's its own thing, but it is, but it isn't. It's like, I get that you realize you done messed up on the whole continuity of the MCU, but for Christ's sake, try to right your wrong here and try to. It's like, that's one nice thing that they've had, is the consistency through all of the madness that is Marvel, and this is the first misstep in all of the movies, and it's the moment they partner up with Sony that just shows me that Sony has a bigger dick than MCU does.
Sony's about the money. Marvel is about the
Thank you.
Marvel is about the actual experience of the movie. That's the whole reason that Sony refuses to give up the rights to Spider-Man. The whole reason Sony refuses to give up the rights to Spider-Man, despite the fact that their Spider-Man movies were never that well received. I personally love them. You know this about me, but I love the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I don't think they're great movies. I think they're great Spider-Man movies, but I don't think they're great movies. I think the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the most accurate representation of Spider-Man we've ever gotten. And I think it's one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen, as in the sense that when you watch the movie, it looks like you're watching panels of a comic book during the action sequences. However, I do acknowledge that Amazing Spider-Man 2 was not a good movie. I love it. As a Spider-Man fan, I love that movie, but it is not a good movie by any means. Same with Amazing Spider-Man 1. Amazing Spider-Man 1 was completely unnecessary. I still enjoyed it, but it was completely unnecessary. So if you're really going back in time with it, the last good superhero movie Sony made without the MCU's help was Spider-Man 2 in fucking 2004. Sony refuses to give up the Spider-Man license. And if you look at the ideas that Sony has had before they got involved with the MCU, they are so bad. There was going to be an Aunt May spin-off movie.
Oh my god.
There was going to be an Aunt May spin-off movie. How do you even do that? How do you think that's a good idea?
It's so bad. Sony bad.
I'd also just like to throw out there that the team working on the team that I'm talking about, the Sony that I'm talking about, is also the team that gave us the fucking Ghostbusters reboot. Same people. So that's the kind of good ideas they have and the kind of quality people they have working for them. The team behind the new Venom movie is the same team behind Ghostbusters and the Emoji Movie. You excited yet? You buy your tickets yet?
No.
Another thing that's concerning is the fact that Venom is set to open October 5th, 2018, and no one has been cast except for Tom Hardy.
Honestly, I feel the Venom movie is like, it's to the point where they feel they have enough cash to actually go down on the payment, but I don't feel it's gonna. I feel it's gonna be in that development hell for the longest time. In a few months, they'll be like, "Oh, Venom movie canceled. Why? Because reasons."
Because you're stupid. The thing that worries me about the Venom movie is that it's not going to be canceled. Because you know what wasn't canceled? Ghostbusters and the Emoji Movie. Those weren't canceled. Those came out. Sony doesn't have any integrity as a studio.
God, I hate that Flexico guy. Yeah, that's like the entire aspect of the fact of when Amy Pascal accidentally was like, when they talked about Homecoming and they were like, oh, what's this about Venom? And she's like, oh yeah, so Venom's coming and it's totally connected to everything else. And Kevin Feige's face of, the fuck did you just say about my universe? It's like, I believe not, because you have already stated that it is, and I quote, an R-rated sci-fi horror film. So it's like, when they first announced that too, it was my entire mentality on that shenanigans is either it's legit and she spilled the beans too early, or just BS and it's not happening. So it's either she spilled the beans too early, or she just is talking out her ass, and that's that, and she thinks they can just piggyback off of the greatness that is the MCU without literally contributing anything outside of your main man Spidey, because he is your biggest cash cow.
That's exactly what it is.
So they're just trying to jump
also the news that there wasn't more news that came out about the actual tone of the movie. It's not going to be a sci-fi horror. They described it as Zombieland.
That's right. You said it was supposed to be like a Zombieland spin, even though originally the first time they announced it, they were like,
"What's her face? Whatever her name is." She said that if you liked Zombieland, you're going to like Venom because there's going to be a lot of elements of that in Venom. It's like,
no,
stop. Just stop.
Just don't do it.
Stop making movies, Sony.
Give up Spider-Man. Let him completely just be part of Disney's Marvel, because you're not good at this. Which is why when they first showed him in Civil War, people were losing their freaking minds.
Yeah, that's why people lost their minds. And when Spidey appeared in Civil War, it's because like we felt like we had finally taken our character back. It's one of those things where it's like I felt like Sony was almost holding him hostage.
Even the movie of Spider-Man itself was them saying, like, welcome back. That was the whole point of them calling it Homecoming, not just for, like, you know, the fact of the movie saying, oh, it's a homecoming dance, ha 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 ha. It was literally saying, no, like, welcome back to the freaking fold, homie.
Welcome back to where you're supposed to be.
But that was the biggest play on words about that. It was the whole idea of them saying welcome home to the character, not just making it a good little like high school story about a homecoming dance.
Spider-Man Homecoming was called Homecoming because it was Spider-Man coming back. It was the character coming back to Marvel. It was the character coming back to the people who actually cared about him. That's why Homecoming and Civil War were so good in terms of Spider-Man.
Even then, Spider-Man has like super little screen time in Civil War, and yet he was still like one of the highlights. That just goes to show how much Marvel is like, no, this is our front runner, this is our homie right here. This is the shit.
Because I feel like for the longest time, Sony was just holding Spider-Man hostage, and
they still are technically.
If you had any kind of artistic integrity, you would accept defeat. You would accept that people don't like your Spider-Man movies, and you would give the rights to the people that do make good comic book movies. That you have to recognize that the reason why your Spider-Man movies were so successful, despite the fact that they weren't good movies, is because there's a lot of people who really care about this character and really love this character. And there's also a whole there's a whole studio making movies and movies and movies and TV shows and everything full of characters that people love. And they want your character. MCU wants Spider-Man back, but Sony won't give it to them.
Oh my gosh.
It's the same thing with the X-Men, but to a slightly lesser degree because Fox actually knows what they're doing. Sony doesn't know what they're doing. It's like if you had any kind of integrity for your fans, which Sony has clearly showed they don't, and respect for characters that people love, you would give up Spider-Man. You wouldn't just parade him around and try to use him as a way to make a quick buck. But that's what they're doing with the Venom movie. The main thing that's making me angry about the Venom movie is the whole not part of the MCU, but it is part of the Spider-Man Homecoming universe.
Because it's totally different.
Like, one of two things is happening here. either one, Sony is just trying as hard as they can to not say that it's not part of the MCU. Because if they say it's a Spider-Man movie not part of the MCU, they know no one will care. So either A, they're trying their hardest to not admit that, or B, they legitimately don't know that Homecoming was part of the MCU. Oh, and the other thing that was making me angry was the fact that the new Venom movie is going to kick off their Spider-Man universe.
Without Spider-Man.
Without Spider-Man. The Venom movie is going to kick off their own cinematic universe, but there's not going to be Spider-Man. There's going to be Spider-Man characters. Black Cat is rumored to make an appearance, which is cool.
Silver.
And Silver is rumored to make an appearance, which is cool.
Even Tom Holland, our current Spider-Man has deliberately said, "Oh yeah, I'm not attached to these movies at all."
Yeah.
By any means.
So there's no Spider-Man, unless the other rumors are true that Andrew Garfield is going to come back to be Spider-Man, which would be the most backwards, the most nonsensical thing ever. No, but that's not that rumor actually has traction, which is what's scaring me. Because Garfield's original contract before they canceled Amazing Spider-Man 3 and all the original Venom movie that was going to come out, before that, his contract was set to run out in 2020. They just didn't finish it because of the MCU.
It was trash.
Andrew Garfield's original Spider-Man contract runs out in 2020. He's technically still on contract to be Spider-Man. It's just he hasn't had any movies because no one liked his movies. So, but now that Sony feels like they can pump out this trash and call it a Spider-Man movie, they might bring Andrew Garfield back. Which, Wyatt and I have had this conversation. I thought Andrew Garfield was a fine Spider-Man. He just doesn't fit. And also, it's going to be
fit Peter Parker.
It's going to be incredibly jarring to have two different Spider-Man at the same time. I think that's one thing that Sony doesn't understand, is the fact that you can't have two of the same character coexisting in different universes. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's not
with the
same
different
universe.
Universes. You can't have two actors playing the same character with different stories in the same universe on screen at the same time. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Sell the rights to MCU, make some money, because I know that's all you guys care about over at Sony is making money. You could even do a licensing thing. Just like make an agreement that like we're gonna give you X amount of money for every time that you use a Sony character, and we're just not gonna make movies with the characters anymore. You would make so many people happy if you just stopped making movies and gave all the rights to MCU. Because you know the MCU, you know that Marvel would pay that money to get their characters back.
Well, I was going to say, the current deal that has now been stated, that is a thing, is all the profits from Homecoming's ticket sales go to Sony's pocket, but all merchandising of the Spider-Man character goes to Disney. That is the current thing that they have signed up for.
But that exactly is the problem, that right there. It's like, we're going to split up the money instead of just giving you the character back. We're going to continue to hold this character hostage and just give you some money for it. We'll split up the profits, split the profits, and that's basically the same thing. Instead of just giving you the character and letting people who actually give a shit about the character make the movies. I'm also someone I think Tom Hardy as Venom is a horrible choice. I think that was the epitome of a Sony choice. Hardy is fucking old, dude. You know who else is fucking old? Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone. Everyone in the Amazing Spider-Man cast was way too old to be playing the characters they were playing. Which is another thing that pisses me off. Venom is supposed to be the same age. Venom and Peter are supposed to be the same age. So that means if they want to make their Venom movie make sense, even in the Homecoming universe it wouldn't make sense. Because he's just way too old. There's no way to make Tom Hardy look like he's a high schooler.
In terms of what you said earlier about my Andrew Garfield, like you and I saying Andrew Garfield's a good Spidey. Logic behind that, go look up video Batman on Batman from Kevin Smith. He has a review of Homecoming, and he talks about both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and I couldn't agree more with them, which is Tobey Maguire was a good Peter Parker, but a super dark, not so perfect Spider-Man, and it was too much, while Andrew Garfield was a meh Peter Parker, but a super funny, witty Spidey. But then Tom Holland is just a perfect mix of everything. He makes things awkward, and he makes things just as witty when he is in costume, and that's what we needed.
Or I guess what I say a typical Sony casting for Tom Hardy is the fact that I have no doubt that Tom Hardy could play the shit out of Venom. I think he could be a great Venom.
Oh my! Whoa!
wow. But it's just that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. There's a reason why you don't cast him though. He's just too old. He's too old and he doesn't fit with the universe that's established. But Sony has no respect for universes, despite the fact that they're a part of one, and that after Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, they thought they were going. This is what's making me the most angry though, is the fact that after Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, Sony was going to start their own whole Spider-Man universe. There was going to be a Sinister Six movie, there was going to be a Venom movie, there was going to be Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4, there was going to be Spider-Gwen, there was going to be, like, everything. They were going to do this massive Spider-Man universe, and they canceled it because no one wanted it. But now that Spider-Man is in the MCU and Spider-Man is popular and in positive eyes in the eyes of moviegoers and has positive reception in the eyes of moviegoers, Sony's like, oh yeah, you know all those shitty plans that we had a few years ago? Yeah, we're bringing all of those back because apparently Spidey's popular now, so therefore
can we please
it's
leave
not
this
shitty
lobby?
anymore. I just hate that mentality of Sony. It's like, there's money. We had a shitty idea that no one liked, so we canceled it. But now that there's money that we didn't even earn, the MCU earned this money, and we're just taking a buck out of it. But now that there's money in these characters that were a part of the shitty idea is no longer shitty. That's Sony's mentality. Sony's totally just like, this idea is shitty until there's money, then it's not shitty anymore.
The other thing about the whole Sinister Six thing, now that you bring it up though, the MCU of Homecoming, guess what? They already set up 2 more Sinister Six characters that weren't even planned. Like, they had no casting, they had nothing. You know who those were? Vulture and Scorpion.
Shocker.
You know who did really
Shocker
good?
and Scorpion,
and Shocker.
Yeah.
And Shocker, Scorpion, and Vulture.
And Vulture are already in the MCU
Boom.
now.
One movie down, and you know what? The movie wasn't trash.
The problem that so many Sony movies have is just trying to shove too many villains into one movie. Homecoming had like 5 or 6 big-name Spider-Man villains, and it didn't feel crammed at all. Because who are all the villains in Spider-Man Homecoming? There was Vulture, there was Shocker. Vulture and Shocker were the main 2. Then there was a cameo appearance by Scorpion. The Tinkerer was like a minor villain.
Yeah, Tinkerer was a part of Vulture Squad as well.
Oh, who's the character? Is it the Observer, the Watcher?
The Prowler.
The Prowler, that's it. Yeah.
Prowler.
The dude in the
He's talking about
in the awesome interrogation scene. The guy he's interrogating, that's the Prowler. That's how you shove a whole bunch of characters and set up a whole bunch of characters in a one movie without it seeming crammed. Without pulling a Spider-Man 3. The fact that pulling a Spider-Man 3 is actually like a phrase now in terms of comics and movies. Yeah, the fact that pulling a Spider-Man 3 is actually a term now is really funny to me. But that's how you do it. Homecoming was how you do it. That's how you get a whole bunch of villains in a movie and set up a whole bunch of sequels without pulling a Spider-Man 3. It's just like Sony has proven themselves to not know how to treat their own characters. So give the characters to people who actually want the characters, because there's a lot of people who want them. Have some fucking integrity. Have some respect for your fans. And also the fact that Spidey's just a kid.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the thing that they always kind of avoid in Sony movies? Yeah, they didn't really do that with Marvel, with the MCU Homecoming.
That's so stupid. That's another thing, is the fact that Sony Spider-Man movies always tried to avoid the fact that he was just a kid. And then we had Homecoming that showed us the greatness that can come if you embrace that character trait. The fact that Spider-Man is just a kid.
Yeah, like I remember a bunch of people were like, oh my god, like this is just the high school thing. It's like, huh, who would have thought?
Gee whiz, have you read Spider-Man?
Would actually be in high school. What an idea. And it's like, did it pay off well? Yeah, because it's not something we've seen. It's not a superhero that we've actually witnessed done properly outside of like, what? Spider-Man 1 and 2, even then, they didn't hit that aspect of Spider-Man down by any means. What, in the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, he's supposed to be a senior getting ready to go to college?
Yeah,
like, that was
in the very first Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man moves into his first apartment. Like, the very first time we saw Spider-Man on screen, he moves into an apartment. Like, that's not a kid. I think in the first Amazing Spider-Man, he's supposed to be a junior in high school, because at the
but even that's pushing it.
Even that's pushing it, yeah. Pushing it because Andrew Garfield looked too old. And yeah, because you skipped too much of what was going on. You made him turn into Spider-Man older than he should have. That was the main sin. Is that both Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire and the Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, both of them had Spider-Man introduced to the world when he was too old. That's what's so great about Homecoming. Spider-Man became Spider-Man when he was like 15. That's how it should be. Like, the next main arc in the animated series is that Spidey is going to meet up with the Guardians of the Galaxy and take him to space. Spidey's going to have some space adventures with the Guardians, and that's where he's going to get his symbiote suit. And now there's people saying that that's what's going to happen in Infinity War.
MCU? No.
In the
God,
MCU.
No.
Is that Infinity War
Children.
part 2 or so? Part 1 or 2?
Yeah.
Is that since Spidey is going to be in space, it technically would make sense for him to find a symbiote there.
No, children who think, oh, they're all on they're using the current runnings of comics. No. No, you're stupid. You're dumb, and you're not a comic book fan. You have to realize that all of these. Oh God, that was a nasty juke. I'm recording that too. They are actually using a lot of the older comics. It's like they're not going to use these new new comic book arcs for current movies. That they're not established enough for this. And if you think that they are, like you said, going to make Spider-Man find the symbiote suit with the Guardians, technically they could. The likelihood, it's slim to none.
Yeah, they're not going to have an arc in the comic book have the same
that is still technically being
and
published.
Same weight in the movie universe at the same time. Because even if Spidey does find the symbiote suit with the Guardians in Infinity War, you're still getting the same arc in the animated series less than a year before you get it in the movie. The whole point of the movie is that these stories are unique. Like you said, these stories are older, so they're not fresh in your mind. They wouldn't take a fresh in your mind arc and make it into a movie, because you've already heard the story before. The story's going to wear thin before you even hear it. The people thinking that Spidey's going to find his symbiote suit alongside the Guardians while they're in space in Infinity War, I don't see it.
No,
I can see them maybe introducing the symbiote, like kind of hinting that the symbiote exists in Infinity War, but he's not going to get like infected by it until way later.
We get some pretty darn good faithful adaptations, but they're never going to be as picture perfect as the comics are. That's the point of comics.
And people who want picture perfect adaptations of comics, take a look at Amazing Spider-Man. And then another movie that is incredibly faithful to the comics but wasn't well received, one of my favorite movies,
Watchmen.
Watchmen was literally like frame for frame for frame, line for line, perfect comic book adaptation. Not a great movie, because
but then again,
that doesn't
sometimes
translate.
It doesn't always translate to being a great movie. But it was damn near perfect. You could literally, I remember I did that once. My buddy gave me the graphic novel of Watchmen, and I was literally just scanning through the pages, not even looking at what was written, but just looking through the pages of it and watching the movie in the background, and I could see exactly where, they're like, there's this moment, let's make this a thing, because that's a big bloody deal.
Watchmen is one of my all-time favorite movies, but at the same time, I also acknowledge that a frame-for-frame adaptation of a comic book it rarely actually works.
I remember before they announced the separation of the Infinity War movie into 2 parts, they were actually saying that it was going to be Infinity War being the chaotic cluster bomb that it is. And instead of it being spread out, they were going to be like, what's Avengers 4? And they're like, well... And a lot of people will state and assume and hope to God that it could have been a thing, and it was going to be X-Men versus the Avengers. And they were going to team up with Fox and make a movie to break all movies.
Well, I mean, for that to happen, the X-Men cinematic universe would need at least something resembling a canon.